The sky above Earth was darker than usual, not because of clouds or a storm, but because something massive blocked out the sun. Thousands of miles away from any city lights in the small town of Silver Creek, Colorado, Jack Monroe stood on his porch with a pair of binoculars pressed to his eyes. He wasn't sure what he was looking at. At first, he thought it might be some kind of experimental aircraft, maybe even one of those secretive military projects people whispered about. But as the object grew larger and more shapes joined it in the sky, Jack realized this wasn't anything human. Dozens of ships, each bigger than a football field, descended slowly into Earth's atmosphere. They glowed faintly, their metallic surfaces shimmering like liquid metal under the dim sunlight. Jack lowered the binoculars and took a step back, his heart pounding. He had seen enough science fiction movies to know what this probably meant. Aliens. And they didn't look friendly. Across the world, other people were staring up at the same sight, frozen in shock or running for cover. News channels scrambled to report live footage of the event, though no one seemed to have answers. Governments tried to keep calm, issuing statements that urged citizens to stay indoors and avoid panic. But when a booming voice echoed across every radio frequency, television channel, and smartphone speaker, there was no denying what was happening. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, deep and cold, almost mechanical. "We are the Velari. Your planet is now under our control. Resistance will result in your extinction." Jack frowned as he listened to the message repeat itself over and over again. The Velari. That was their name. It sounded strange, alien. Not that he expected them to introduce themselves as Bob or Steve. He glanced around his quiet neighborhood. A few neighbors had come outside, pointing at the sky and talking nervously. Others were rushing back inside, slamming doors shut. Jack felt a mix of anger and helplessness. What could anyone do against an army that had ships capable of blocking out the sun? Back in Washington, D.C., Emily Dawson sat hunched over her desk, headphones clamped tightly over her ears. She worked in a communications center buried deep underground, far away from prying eyes. Her job was simple: monitor signals, intercept transmissions, and decode anything unusual. Normally, her days were filled with static and silence, broken only by the occasional blip of encrypted government chatter. But today, her screens lit up with activity. The moment the Velari ships entered orbit, strange frequencies flooded the airwaves. Emily adjusted dials and typed furiously, trying to make sense of the jumbled mess of data pouring in. Most of it was garbled nonsense, but snippets of clear audio began to emerge. Words she couldn't understand, clicks and whistles mixed with distorted tones. She recorded everything, hoping someone smarter than her could piece it together later. As the hours passed, Emily noticed patterns in the signals. Certain sequences repeated themselves, almost like code. She flagged these sections and ran them through translation software designed for deciphering unknown languages. Slowly, fragments of meaning started to appear. Coordinates, orders, references to weapon systems. It wasn't much, but it was something important. Meanwhile, chaos erupted elsewhere. In New York City, crowds gathered in Times Square, staring up at massive digital billboards that displayed shaky video feeds of the alien fleet. Some people screamed, others cried, and a few knelt in prayer. Military vehicles roared through the streets, soldiers shouting orders as they prepared for battle. No one knew where the aliens would strike first, or if they already had. In Los Angeles, a group of teenagers filmed themselves reacting to the invasion on social media. One boy joked about how cool it would be to meet real aliens, while another girl sobbed uncontrollably, convinced the end of the world had arrived. Their posts went viral within minutes, spreading fear and confusion faster than any official announcement ever could. Back in Colorado, Jack decided it was time to act. He grabbed his rifle, a sleek, custom-built sniper rifle he'd spent years perfecting, and loaded it with care. He didn't know if bullets would do anything against whatever armor the aliens wore, but sitting around doing nothing wasn't an option either. His phone buzzed constantly with alerts, but he ignored it. Instead, he climbed into his old pickup truck and drove toward the nearest military base. The roads were crowded with panicked civilians fleeing in both directions, Some carried bags stuffed with supplies, others dragged children along, their faces pale with terror. Jack kept his focus on the road ahead, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He had always been a loner, preferring the solitude of the mountains to the noise of cities. Now he wished he had someone to talk to, someone who could tell him this was all just a bad dream. When he finally reached the base, it was crawling with activity. Soldiers shouted orders, trucks rumbled past, and helicopters lifted off into the sky. Jack parked his truck and approached a young officer standing near the gate. "I want to help," he said simply. The officer looked him up and down, taking in the rifle slung over his shoulder. "Who are you?" he asked. "Jack Monroe." "I'm a sniper." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "We'll take all the help we can get. Follow me." Jack followed the officer into a briefing tent where maps and satellite images covered the walls. Officers barked commands, strategizing how best to defend against an enemy they barely understood. Jack listened silently, absorbing every detail. When the meeting ended, he was assigned to a team tasked with defending a critical supply route through the Rocky Mountains. It wasn't long before the fighting began. The Velari deployed ground forces, towering figures clad in sleek exosuits that made them nearly invincible. They marched forward without hesitation, their weapons firing beams of energy that cut through buildings like paper. Human soldiers fired back, but their bullets bounced harmlessly off the aliens' armor. From his position high on a ridge, Jack watched as the battle unfolded below. The Velari moved with precision, their tactics clearly rehearsed. They laughed. At least that's what it sounded like, as they advanced, mocking the humans for their feeble attempts to resist. Jack gritted his teeth, adjusting his scope. He picked a target, an alien officer standing slightly apart from the rest, giving orders with sweeping gestures. Taking a deep breath, Jack steadied his aim and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing across the valley. The alien officer crumpled to the ground, a clean hole drilled straight through its helmet. For a moment, there was silence. Then chaos erupted among the Velari ranks. Without their leader, they faltered, unsure of what to do next. Jack smiled grimly. Maybe bullets couldn't stop these invaders entirely, but they could still cause damage if you knew where to aim. The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains when Jack Monroe adjusted his position on the ridge. He lay flat on the cold ground, his rifle steady in his hands. Below him, the Velari forces were regrouping after the previous day's ambush. Their towering exosuits gleamed in the early morning light, and their weapons hummed softly as they scanned the area for threats. Jack knew they wouldn't stay confused for long. The aliens were smart, too smart, and they would adapt quickly if humans didn't stay one step ahead. Jack glanced at the small team of soldiers scattered around him. There were 6 of them, all handpicked for their marksmanship skills. Among them was Rachel Hayes, a young woman with sharp eyes and a quiet determination. She had joined the military just a year ago, but already showed promise as a sniper. Jack hadn't worked with her before, but he could tell she was good. She moved quietly, stayed focused, and didn't waste words. A trait Jack appreciated. "Stay low," Jack whispered into his radio. "They're still looking for us." Rachel nodded from her spot a few yards away, her gaze fixed through the scope of her rifle. She didn't respond verbally, knowing that silence was their best defense. The group had spent the night setting up camouflaged positions along the ridge, blending into the rocks and trees so well that even the advanced sensors of the Velari struggled to detect them. For now, they remained hidden, but Jack knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens found them. Down in the valley, the Velari began their march again. They moved in tight formations, their energy rifles glowing faintly as they scanned the terrain. Every step they took sent vibrations through the ground, making it easy for Jack to track their movements. He watched as one of the aliens paused, tilting its head as if listening for something. Jack held his breath, his finger hovering over the trigger. If the alien spotted them, the entire operation would collapse. But then the alien turned away, continuing its march. Jack exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle just enough to glance at Rachel. She gave him a quick thumbs up, signaling she was ready. Jack returned the gesture, then refocused on the task at hand. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about proving that humanity could fight back, and Jack intended to make every shot count. Back in Washington, D.C., Emily Dawson sat hunched over her desk, her eyes glued to the glowing screen in front of her. The intercepted signals from the Velari fleet filled her workspace, lines of code scrolling endlessly across multiple monitors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she worked tirelessly to decode the alien language. It was slow, frustrating work, but Emily refused to give up. Somewhere in this mess of data, there had to be something useful, something that could help turn the tide of the war. Her breakthrough came late in the afternoon. After hours of cross-referencing patterns and running algorithms, Emily finally cracked a section of the transmission. It wasn't much, a single phrase translated roughly to command structure, but it was enough to spark an idea. She traced the signal back to its source, identifying a specific frequency used by the Velari officers to coordinate their troops. If she could jam or disrupt that frequency, she might be able to cripple their ability to communicate. Excited, Emily grabbed her phone and called the military liaison assigned to her unit. "I think I've found something," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "The Velari rely heavily on centralized command. If we can target their leaders or disrupt their communications, we might have a chance." The liaison listened carefully, then promised to pass the information along to the field commanders. Emily hung up and leaned back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days, but she couldn't afford to stop now. Not when lives depended on her work. By midday, the battle in the Rockies had intensified. The Velari launched a full-scale assault on the supply route, determined to secure it before human reinforcements arrived. Their weapons cut through the air with deafening blasts, sending chunks of rock and dirt flying in every direction. Jack and his team clung to their positions, firing carefully timed shots to pick off key targets. Rachel took aim at a Velari soldier carrying what looked like a heavy energy cannon. Her first shot missed, grazing the side of its exosuit. But her second hit true, striking the weapon and causing it to overload in a burst of sparks. The alien staggered backward, disoriented, giving Jack the opening he needed to finish it off, with a clean shot to the head. "Nice work," Jack murmured into his radio, keeping his voice low. "Thanks," Rachel replied, her tone calm despite the chaos around them. She reloaded her rifle and shifted to a new position, scanning for her next target. As the hours dragged on, the Velari grew more aggressive. They deployed drones equipped with advanced sensors, sweeping the ridge for any sign of resistance. Jack cursed under his breath as one of the drones hovered dangerously close to his hiding spot. He flattened himself against the ground, praying the camouflage held. Beside him, Rachel did the same, her breathing shallow but controlled. Suddenly, the drone veered away, drawn toward another part of the ridge. Jack exhaled in relief, though he knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. The Velari were relentless, and their technology far surpassed anything humans had ever faced. But Jack also knew that no machine was perfect, even the most advanced systems had blind spots, and it was those weaknesses that humans needed to exploit. While Jack and his team fought in the mountains, news of their success spread quickly among the scattered human forces. Reports poured in from other fronts, detailing similar victories achieved by snipers using guerrilla tactics. In Chicago, a lone marksman managed to disable an entire convoy of Velari vehicles by targeting their fuel tanks. In Texas, a group of sharpshooters ambushed a patrol, eliminating half the squad before disappearing into the desert. These stories inspired others to adopt the same strategies. Across the globe, soldiers began training in stealth and precision shooting, learning how to use the environment to their advantage. The Velari, accustomed to overwhelming their opponents with brute force, found themselves struggling to adapt. Their commanders dismissed the human tactics as primitive and ineffective, refusing to believe that such simple methods could pose a real threat. But Jack knew better. Each successful ambush chipped away at the invaders' confidence, forcing them to divert resources to protect their flanks. It was a small victory, but in a war this lopsided, every little bit mattered. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack and his team regrouped in a secluded cave. They were exhausted, their bodies aching from hours of tension and adrenaline. Rachel handed out rations, passing around bottles of water and bars of tasteless protein. No one spoke much, too tired to do anything but eat and rest. Jack stared into the fire they had built, his mind racing. Today had been a win, but tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Velari wouldn't give up easily, and sooner or later they would figure out how to counter the human snipers. When that happened, Jack knew they would need more than just clever tactics to survive. "We can't keep doing this forever," Rachel said quietly, breaking the silence. "Sooner or later they'll catch on." Jack nodded, his expression grim. "Yeah, but until then, we keep hitting them where it hurts. We make them regret coming here." Rachel smiled faintly, admiration flickering in her eyes. "You really think we can win?" "I don't know," Jack admitted. "But I do know one thing. We're not going down without a fight." Outside the cave, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it the distant rumble of alien engines. The war was far from over, but for now Jack and his team had earned a moment of peace. And in a world teetering on the brink of destruction, even a brief respite felt like a victory. The days that followed were a blur of tension and action for Jack Monroe and his team. The Velari, though still powerful, had begun to show signs of frustration. Their once perfect formations were now more cautious, their movements slower as they scanned every shadow and rock for ambushes. Word of the snipers' success in the Rockies spread like wildfire among human forces, inspiring others to adopt similar tactics. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a glimmer of hope. Jack knew better than to let that hope cloud his judgment. He understood that the Velari's hesitation wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, they would find a way to counter the guerrilla attacks. Until then, he intended to make every shot count. Each morning, he and his team climbed higher into the mountains, finding new vantage points to strike at the enemy. They worked tirelessly, moving under the cover of darkness and striking during daylight when the aliens felt most secure. Rachel Hayes had become an invaluable part of the team. Her natural talent for precision shooting complemented Jack's experience perfectly. Together they developed a rhythm, Rachel spotting targets while Jack lined up his shots, their communication minimal but effective. Over time, Rachel grew bolder, taking risks that paid off in critical moments. She no longer hesitated before pulling the trigger, her confidence growing with each successful hit. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of fighting, Jack called the team together. They gathered around a small fire in a secluded hollow, their faces illuminated by flickering orange light. The air was cold, and the distant hum of Velari drones filled the silence between conversations. Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We need to change things up," he said, his voice low but firm. "They're starting to adapt. If we keep doing the same thing, they'll figure us out." Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. "What do you have in mind?" Jack paused, considering his words carefully. "We hit them where it hurts the most. Their command structure. Without leaders, their soldiers are disorganized. We've seen it before." The others exchanged glances, some looking skeptical, others intrigued. One of the younger soldiers, a man named Kyle, spoke up. "How do we even find their commanders? They're always surrounded by guards." Jack smiled faintly, a hint of determination in his eyes. "That's where Emily comes in." Back in Washington, D.C., Emily Dawson was working harder than ever. The intercepted signals she had decoded earlier provided valuable insight into the Velari's chain of command. She learned that their officers relied heavily on real-time communication to coordinate attacks, often transmitting orders from centralized locations. These hubs were vulnerable. If someone could locate and destroy them, the entire operation could collapse. Emily shared this information with military strategists, who immediately recognized its potential. However, locating these hubs wasn't easy. The Velari encrypted their transmissions using complex algorithms that changed constantly. Emily spent hours analyzing patterns, searching for any clue that might lead her to their next target. It was exhausting work, but she refused to give up. Her breakthrough came late one night. While reviewing data from recent battles, Emily noticed something unusual, a recurring frequency used by the Velari during key operations. She traced the signal back to a specific location deep within enemy territory. Cross-referencing satellite images confirmed her suspicions. The signal originated from a fortified compound nestled in a valley near the Rockies. Excited, Emily contacted Jack directly. "I found something big," she said over the radio. "A key. Command hub. Take it out and you'll cripple their entire operation in the region." Jack listened intently, committing every detail to memory. When Emily finished, he thanked her, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We'll get it done," he promised. The plan was risky, but Jack knew it was worth the gamble. The command hub was heavily guarded, surrounded by patrols and automated turrets. Getting close enough to destroy it would require stealth, precision, and a lot of luck. Jack spent hours studying maps and aerial photos, plotting a route that minimized exposure. By the time he briefed the team, he had a clear strategy in mind. "We move at night," he explained, pointing to a marked path on the map. "Stick to the shadows, avoid patrols, and disable any cameras you see. Once we're inside the perimeter, we split into 2 groups. Rachel and I will take the main building. Kyle and Marcus will cover our escape." The team nodded, their expressions grim but determined. None of them doubted the danger they were about to face, but they also knew how important this mission was. If they succeeded, they could turn the tide of the war in their favor. That night, they set out under the cover of darkness. The journey was tense, every step calculated to avoid detection. Rachel moved silently beside Jack, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She carried a small toolkit designed to disable security systems, her hands steady despite the weight of responsibility. Behind them, Kyle and Marcus kept watch, their weapons ready in case trouble arose. As they approached the compound, the hum of alien machinery grew louder. Floodlights illuminated the area, casting long shadows across the ground. Jack signaled for the team to stop, crouching behind a cluster of rocks. Ahead, a pair of Velari guards patrolled the perimeter, their exosuits glowing faintly in the dim light. Rachel pulled out her toolkit and began working on a nearby camera. Her movements were quick and precise, and within seconds, the device powered down. Jack gave her a thumbs up, then motioned for the others to follow. They slipped past the guards, staying low and avoiding the beams of light. Inside the compound, the air was thick with tension. The main building loomed ahead, its walls reinforced with alien technology. Jack and Rachel moved toward it, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. Kyle and Marcus took up positions near the entrance, keeping watch for reinforcements. Reaching the door, Rachel knelt down and examined the lock. It was unlike anything she had seen before, smooth and metallic, with no visible mechanism. She frowned, digging through her toolkit for something that might work. After a few moments of trial and error, she managed to pry it open with a sharp tool. The door slid aside with a soft hiss, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Jack entered first, his rifle raised. The interior was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of machinery. They moved cautiously, checking every room for signs of activity. Finally, they reached the control center, a large chamber filled with glowing panels and strange devices. In the center stood a towering console pulsing with energy. "This is it," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. Rachel nodded, pulling out a small explosive charge. She placed it carefully on the console, setting the timer for 5 minutes. "Let's go," she said, her tone urgent. They retraced their steps, moving faster now that time was running out. As they emerged from the building, Kyle and Marcus covered their retreat, firing short bursts at approaching Velari soldiers. The aliens responded with devastating blasts of energy, forcing the team to dive for cover. "Move!" Jack shouted, urging everyone forward. They sprinted across the compound, dodging explosions and gunfire. Just as they reached the edge of the perimeter, The charge detonated, sending a shockwave rippling through the valley. The command hub erupted in flames, its destruction lighting up the night sky. For a moment, there was silence. Then, chaos broke loose. Without their central hub, the Velari forces in the area became disoriented, their movements erratic. Jack and his team took advantage of the confusion, disappearing into the mountains before the aliens could regroup. By dawn, the team had returned to their hidden base. Exhausted but victorious, they collapsed around the fire, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Rachel grinned, leaning back against a rock. "That was insane," she said, laughing softly. Jack nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "Yeah, but it worked." Kyle and Marcus exchanged high fives, their relief palpable. For the first time, in weeks they allowed themselves to relax, knowing they had dealt a significant blow to the invaders. But Jack knew the fight was far from over. The Velari wouldn't give up easily, and humanity still faced overwhelming odds. Still, tonight's victory proved one thing. Even the smallest acts of resistance could make a difference. And as long as people like him and Rachel were willing to stand and fight, there was hope for Earth's survival. The destruction of the Velari command hub sent shockwaves through their ranks. For days, their forces in the Rockies were thrown into disarray, unable to coordinate attacks or maintain their usual precision. Human resistance groups seized the opportunity, launching counteroffensives that pushed the invaders back in several key areas. News of the victory spread quickly, boosting morale across Earth. The snipers, once dismissed as primitive and ineffective, were now hailed as heroes. Jack Monroe and his team found themselves at the center of this newfound hope. Their success had inspired others to adopt similar tactics, blending stealth with precision to exploit the Velari's weaknesses. Reports poured in from all over the world, snipers taking out alien officers, sabotaging supply lines, and disrupting communications. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, though he knew better than to let it go to his head. The war was far from over, and the Velari would adapt sooner or later. Still, the brief lull gave Jack and his team time to rest and regroup. They returned to their hidden base in the mountains, using the quiet moments to repair equipment, share stories, and plan their next move. Rachel Hayes spent hours cleaning her rifle, her hands moving with practiced ease. She had grown more confident since joining the team, her sharp eyes and steady aim earning her Jack's trust. Kyle and Marcus joked about their close calls during the last mission, their laughter echoing through the valley. Despite the lighter mood, Jack remained focused. He knew the Velari wouldn't stay confused for long. Their technology was advanced, and their commanders were ruthless. If humanity wanted to survive, they needed to strike harder and smarter than ever before. Back in Washington, D.C., Emily Dawson worked tirelessly to uncover more weaknesses in the Velari fleet. Her earlier success had earned her access to classified military databases, giving her tools she hadn't dared dream of before. She spent hours analyzing intercepted transmissions, searching for patterns or vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her mind racing with possibilities. One evening, while reviewing data from recent battles, Emily stumbled upon something extraordinary. Buried deep within the alien signals was a reference to a massive ship, hovering above North America, a command vessel responsible for coordinating all ground operations in the region. It wasn't just any ship. It was the flagship of the entire invasion force. Destroying it would deal a catastrophic blow to the Velari, potentially crippling their ability to wage war on Earth. Excited, Emily cross-referenced the signal with satellite images, pinpointing the ship's exact location. It floated high above the atmosphere, its sleek design gleaming ominously in the sunlight. Emily's heart raced as she realized the implications. This was humanity's best chance to turn the tide of the war, but getting close enough to attack, it seemed impossible. She contacted Jack immediately, her voice trembling with urgency. "I found their flagship," she said over the radio. "It's controlling everything. If you can take it out, we might have a real shot at winning." Jack listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Emily finished, he exhaled slowly, considering the risks. How do we even get to it? He asked. Their ships are shielded. Bullets won't do anything. Emily hesitated, then replied, There's a weak point, a maintenance hatch on the underside. It's exposed when they deploy smaller vessels. If you can sneak aboard during one of those deployments, you might be able to plant explosives inside. Jack nodded, though he knew the odds were against them. Infiltrating an alien command ship sounded like suicide, but if it meant saving Earth, he was willing to try. The plan came together quickly, though not without debate. Jack insisted on leading the mission himself, knowing his experience made him the best choice. Rachel volunteered to join him, refusing to let him go alone. Kyle and Marcus stayed behind to cover their escape, promising to create distractions if things went wrong. To reach the flagship, they needed a way to blend in with the Velari forces. Scavenging parts from downed drones and vehicles, the team built makeshift disguises designed to mimic alien armor. The suits were crude but functional, allowing them to move undetected among the invaders. Jack and Rachel tested their gear repeatedly, ensuring it held up under scrutiny. On the night of the mission, the team gathered near a Velari outpost where smaller vessels frequently launched and returned to the flagship. They waited patiently, concealed by darkness and camouflage. Hours passed before a group of alien shuttles descended from the sky, their engines roaring as they landed in formation. Jack signaled for silence, watching as Velari soldiers disembarked and began unloading supplies. "This is our chance," Jack whispered, adjusting the helmet of his disguise. He and Rachel moved carefully, sticking to the shadows as they approached the nearest shuttle. The ramp was still lowered, giving them access to the interior. They slipped aboard unnoticed, finding cover behind crates of alien equipment. Inside the shuttle, the air was cold and smelled faintly metallic. Jack glanced at Rachel, who nodded in reassurance. Together, they prepared for what came next. As the shuttle lifted off, vibrations rattled through the hull, signaling their ascent toward the flagship. The journey felt endless, each moment stretching longer than the last. Jack kept his rifle ready, knowing they might need to fight their key way out. Finally, the shuttle docked with the flagship, its ramp lowering to reveal a bustling hangar bay. Velari soldiers moved about, their glowing exosuits casting eerie reflections on the walls. Jack and Rachel stepped off the shuttle, their hearts pounding. They walked purposefully, mimicking the stiff movements of the aliens around them. No one stopped them, though Jack could feel eyes on him as they passed. They followed signs pointing toward the maintenance hatch, their steps measured and deliberate. Reaching their destination, they found the hatch exactly where Emily had described. It was large enough for a person to squeeze through, though accessing it required bypassing a security panel. Rachel knelt down, pulling out her toolkit. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to focus. After a tense minute, the panel clicked open, revealing a narrow tunnel leading deeper into the ship. "Let's go," Jack murmured, motioning for Rachel to follow. They crawled through the tunnel, their progress slow and cramped. The air grew, colder as they moved, the hum of machinery growing louder with each passing second. Finally, they emerged into a dimly lit corridor, lined with pipes and conduits. Jack pulled out a small explosive charge, placing it carefully near a critical junction. He set the timer for 5 minutes, knowing they didn't have much time to escape. "Move," he urged, turning back toward the tunnel. As they retraced their steps, alarms blared throughout the ship. Lights flashed red, bathing the corridors in an ominous glow. Jack cursed under his breath, realizing someone must have discovered their sabotage. They quickened their pace, ducking into alcoves whenever patrols passed. Reaching the hangar bay, they found chaos erupting. Velari soldiers scrambled to respond to the breach, their shouts echoing through the cavernous space. Jack spotted an empty shuttle preparing to depart and sprinted toward it, Rachel close behind. They boarded just as the engines roared to life, the shuttle lifting off seconds later. Behind them, the flagship shuddered violently as the explosives detonated. A section of the hull tore away, sending debris spiraling into space. Alarms wailed louder, drowning out the hum of machinery. Jack and Rachel clung to their seats, holding on as the shuttle hurtled toward Earth. When they finally landed, they staggered out into the cool mountain air, their disguises discarded. Kyle and Marcus greeted them with wide grins, relief evident in their expressions. "You did it," Kyle said, slapping Jack on the back. Jack nodded, exhaustion washing over him. "Yeah, we did. The destruction of the flagship marked a turning point in the war. Without centralized control, the Velari, forces on Earth became fragmented. Their once coordinated attacks reduced to scattered skirmishes. Humanity seized the opportunity, pushing back against the invaders with renewed strength. Cities that had fallen were reclaimed, and hope began to spread across the planet. For Jack and his team, the victory brought both pride and reflection. They had accomplished something remarkable, proving that even the smallest acts of resistance could change the course of history. But Jack knew the fight was far from over. The Velari still controlled much of Earth's orbit, and their full strength had yet to be tested. As he stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, rifle slung over his shoulder, Jack allowed himself a rare moment of peace. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Behind him, Rachel joined him, her presence comforting in its familiarity. "We're not done yet," she said softly, echoing his thoughts. "No," Jack agreed, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. "But we've shown them what we're capable of. And for now, that was enough." The aftermath of the flagship's destruction rippled across the globe like a shockwave. The Velari, once unstoppable in their dominance, were now visibly shaken. Their ground forces, deprived of centralized command, struggled to maintain cohesion. Attacks that had been precise and overwhelming became disjointed and chaotic. For humanity, it was a chance to breathe, to regroup, rebuild, and reclaim what had been lost. In the days following the mission, Jack Monroe and his team returned to their hidden base in the mountains. They were hailed as heroes by those who knew of their daring infiltration, but Jack didn't see himself that way. To him, they had simply done what needed to be done. He spent hours cleaning his rifle, checking every inch for damage or wear. It was a ritual he used to clear his mind, to keep the weight of everything from crushing him. Rachel Hayes sat nearby, sharpening her knife with slow, deliberate strokes. She had changed since joining the team. Her quiet determination had grown into something fiercer, more confident. She glanced at Jack occasionally, wondering if he ever let himself feel proud of what they had achieved. But Jack's expression remained stoic, focused on the next challenge rather than the last victory. Kyle and Marcus were less reserved, celebrating their success with jokes and laughter. They teased each other about close calls during the mission, their voices echoing through the valley. Despite their lightheartedness, there was an underlying seriousness in their tone. Everyone knew the war wasn't over yet, and the Velari would retaliate with everything they had. Across the world, news of the flagship's destruction spread quickly. Cities that had fallen under alien control began to rise again, their citizens, emboldened by the knowledge that the invaders could be beaten. Resistance groups sprang up overnight, inspired by the tactics of Jack and his team. Snipers became symbols of hope, their precision strikes turning the tide in battles large and small. Even ordinary civilians joined the fight, using whatever tools they had to defend their homes. In New York City, a group of teenagers armed with makeshift weapons ambushed a Velari patrol, forcing them to retreat. In Los Angeles, a retired engineer rigged booby traps along major roads, slowing down enemy convoys and giving human forces time to regroup. Every act of defiance, no matter how small, chipped away at the Velari's grip on Earth. Emily Dawson watched it all unfold from her underground communications center in Washington, D.C. Her role in the mission had been indirect, but she felt a deep sense of pride knowing her work had made it possible. Still, she couldn't afford to rest. The Velari fleet remained a looming threat, its ships circling Earth like vultures waiting to strike. Emily continued decoding intercepted signals, searching for any clue that might help humanity prepare for the inevitable counterattack. Late one night, she stumbled upon something alarming, a series of transmissions detailing a plan to deploy a new weapon. The details were vague, but one phrase stood out: Atmospheric destabilization. Emily frowned, running simulations based on the limited data she had. If her calculations were correct, the weapon could strip away Earth's atmosphere, rendering the planet uninhabitable. Her hands trembled as she typed out a report and sent it to military headquarters. She didn't know if humanity had the means to stop such a weapon, but she hoped someone smarter than her could figure it out. For now, all she could do was keep working, keep fighting in her own way. Back in the Rockies, Jack received word of the potential new threat. He gathered his team around the fire, his face grim as he explained the situation. "They're planning something big," he said, his voice low. "Something that could wipe us out completely." Rachel leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What can we do?" Jack shook his head. "I don't know yet. But we can't just sit here and wait for them to hit us. We need to find their weapon systems, any weak points we can exploit." Kyle raised a hand hesitantly. "You think we can take on something like that? I mean, if it's powerful enough to destroy the atmosphere." "We have to try," Jack interrupted, his tone firm. "If we don't, no one else will." The team nodded, their expressions resolute. They had faced impossible odds before and come out alive. This time wouldn't be any different, or so they told themselves. The next morning, Jack led the team deeper into enemy territory. Their goal was to locate a suspected research facility where the Velari were believed to be developing the atmospheric weapon. Intelligence suggested it was hidden in a remote canyon, shielded by advanced cloaking technology. Reaching it would require stealth and precision, skills the team had honed over weeks of guerrilla warfare. As they approached the canyon, the air grew colder, the silence oppressive. Jack signaled for everyone to stay low, scanning the area for signs of movement. The facility was invisible to the naked eye, its presence betrayed only by faint distortions in the air. Jack marked the location on his map, then motioned for Rachel to take point. Rachel moved cautiously, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She carried a device designed to detect energy signatures, its screen glowing softly in the dim light. After several tense minutes, she found what they were looking for, a cluster of readings indicating power sources beneath the ground. "This has to be it," she whispered, pointing to a spot near the base of the canyon wall. Jack nodded, pulling out a small explosive charge. "Let's make sure they regret building this place." The team worked quickly, planting charges at key points around the facility. Each step was calculated, their movements silent and deliberate. As Jack set the final timer, alarms blared throughout. "The canyon!" Red lights flashing as security systems detected the intruders. "Go!" Jack shouted, sprinting toward the exit. Velari soldiers poured out of hidden entrances, their weapons firing beams of energy that cut through the air. Kyle and Marcus provided cover fire, taking down as many enemies as they could while Jack and Rachel ran ahead. Explosions rocked the canyon as the charges detonated, collapsing sections of the facility and sending debris flying in all directions. When they finally reached safety, the team collapsed onto the rocky ground, gasping for breath. Behind them, smoke billowed into the sky, signaling the destruction of the research site. Jack allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, though he knew the Velari would not give up easily. That night, as the team rested in their hidden base, Jack stared into the fire, his thoughts heavy. The mission had been a success, but it felt hollow. The Velari still held the advantage in numbers and technology. Humanity's victories were fleeting, bought with blood and sacrifice. Rachel sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the flames. "Do you think we'll win?" she asked quietly. Jack hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. We've shown them we're not going down without a fight." Rachel smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "That's enough for now." And it was. For now, they had struck another blow against the invaders. For now, they had hope. And in a war, this desperate hope was worth more than gold. The days that followed the destruction of the Velari research facility were tense. The invaders, enraged by humanity's continued resistance, launched a series of brutal counterattacks. Cities that had been reclaimed were bombed into rubble, and entire regions were scorched in retaliation. It was clear the Velari would not tolerate any further defiance. Yet despite the devastation, humanity refused to surrender. Jack Monroe and his team retreated deeper into the mountains, their movements cautious and deliberate. They knew the Velari would be hunting them, seeking revenge for the sabotage of their weapons program. But Jack also knew they couldn't afford to stay hidden forever. Earth's survival depended on keeping the pressure on, forcing the invaders to fight battles on multiple fronts. Rachel Hayes had become indispensable to the team. Her sharp eyes and steady hands had saved them more than once during close calls. She no longer questioned her place among them. She was as much a soldier as anyone else. Kyle and Marcus, though younger and less experienced, had proven themselves reliable under fire. Together, they formed a tight-knit unit, bound by shared struggles and victories. In Washington, D.C., Emily Dawson worked tirelessly to decode new transmissions from the Velari fleet. Her earlier warnings about the atmospheric weapon had prompted military leaders to develop contingency plans, though no one knew if they would work. The weapon remained a looming threat, its existence a constant reminder of how precarious humanity's position truly was. One evening, while analyzing intercepted signals, Emily stumbled upon something unexpected: a communication between two high-ranking Velari officers discussing a final solution. The phrase sent chills down her spine. Digging deeper, she discovered references to a massive assault scheduled to take place within days. The target? A key human stronghold in North America. Emily immediately contacted Jack, her voice trembling with urgency. "They're planning a full-scale attack," she said over the radio. "If we don't stop them, they'll wipe out everything." Jack listened intently, his expression darkening. "Where?" he asked. "A city called Denver," Emily replied. "It's one of the last major bases holding out against them." Jack nodded, though Emily couldn't see him. "We'll handle it." The plan was simple but risky. Jack and his team would infiltrate the area surrounding Denver, using guerrilla tactics to disrupt the Velari advance. Their goal was to slow the enemy long enough for reinforcements to arrive, or at least buy humanity some time to regroup. It was a desperate gamble, but desperate times called for desperate measures. As they approached the outskirts of Denver, the scale of the impending attack became clear. Velari ground forces stretched as far as the eye could see, their exosuits gleaming ominously in the sunlight. Above them, alien ships hovered menacingly, ready to unleash devastating firepower. The sight was overwhelming, but Jack pushed aside his doubts. They had faced impossible odds before and come out alive. This time wouldn't be any different, or so he told himself. The team split up, each member taking a designated zone to cover. Jack and Rachel positioned themselves on a hill overlooking the main road leading into the city. From there they could pick off key targets, officers, engineers, and supply vehicles without being detected. Kyle and Marcus set up traps along secondary routes, hoping to funnel the enemy into kill zones. When the Velari began their march, Jack took aim at an officer directing the assault. His first shot rang out, echoing across the valley. The alien crumpled to the ground, its helmet shattered. Chaos erupted among the ranks as soldiers scrambled to understand what had happened. Rachel followed up with another shot, disabling a heavy artillery piece before it could fire. The attacks continued throughout the day, each hit causing confusion and disorder. The Velari responded with fury, sending patrols to hunt down the snipers. But Jack and his team stayed one step ahead, moving constantly to avoid detection. By nightfall, the invaders' progress had slowed significantly, giving the defenders inside Denver valuable time to prepare. Inside the city, civilians and soldiers worked together to fortify buildings and set up barricades. Children carried supplies, while elderly men and women loaded ammunition into crates. Everyone played a part, united by a common goal: survival. Morale was low, but determination burned brightly in their eyes. They had seen what the Velari were capable of, and they refused to let fear dictate their actions. As dawn broke over the horizon, the battle began in earnest. Velari forces launched a relentless assault, their energy weapons cutting through walls and defenses like paper. Human soldiers fired back with everything they had, their bullets bouncing harmlessly off alien armor but buying precious seconds for others to retreat or regroup. Explosions rocked the streets, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Jack and his team fought alongside the defenders, their rifles never resting. Each shot counted, each life spared meant one more person standing against the invaders. Rachel, perched atop a crumbling building, took aim at a Velari commander coordinating the attack. Her bullet struck true, sending the alien tumbling to the ground. Around her, cheers erupted from exhausted soldiers who saw hope in her precision. But the cost was high. Buildings collapsed under the weight of alien firepower, burying both friend and foe beneath tons of rubble. Bodies littered the streets, their faces frozen in expressions of pain or defiance. Kyle and Marcus fell back to cover a group of civilians fleeing the fighting, sacrificing themselves to ensure the survivors reached safety. By midday, the tide began to turn. Reinforcements arrived from neighboring cities, pouring into Denver with fresh supplies and renewed resolve. Together, they pushed the Velari back, reclaiming block after block until the invaders were forced to retreat entirely. The victory was hard-fought and came at great cost, but it proved one thing. Humanity could stand toe-to-toe with even the most advanced foes, if they worked together. In the aftermath, Jack stood amidst the ruins of Denver, his rifle slung over his shoulder. The city was battered and broken, its skyline reduced to jagged skeletons of steel and concrete. But it still stood, a testament to the resilience of those who called it home. Rachel joined him, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Back in Washington, D.C., Emily watched news footage of the battle, her heart swelling with pride. Humanity had suffered greatly, but it had endured. She returned to her work, determined to uncover whatever secrets the Velari still held. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. But for now, Earth lived to see another day. Jack looked out over the devastated landscape, his mind heavy with thoughts of those lost. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was hope. Hope that humanity would rebuild. Hope that the sacrifices made would not be forgotten. And hope that someday peace might return to a scarred but unbroken world. For now, that was enough.